there was a bill that we kept getting for storage, and my brother died suddenly, and we didn't talk a lot about the business. Anyway, there was this bill for storage, and we could go up to this place, and it's one of those Indiana Jones, where it's just like those like 10 by 10 wooden vaults stacked on each other, like way up high. And we had like 40 of them in there. I'm like, we got to go see what's in there. When my father died, he had given all his art, guns, and memorabilia to the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. Now it's the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. So I think in our heads as a family, all the great stuff is already in a museum. But as I went through these storage vaults, it's like toilet paper, dry cleaning fluid, Academy Award. I thought we were going to throw all this shit away, but we should probably go through everything now.
Fasten your seatbelt.
All right, guys, on today's episode, we have Ethan Wayne. Now, of course, we're going to discuss John Wayne a little bit, but I wanted to really bring Ethan in and just dive into our relationship, what he's doing with his foundation, and kind of the adventures of growing up in old Hollywood. Let's get to it. So you and I recently got on some horses.
We did.
You want to tell the folks about that experience?
This is embarrassing, with my lineage, and then to have an episode like that is really sad.
I'm so happy. It wasn't embarrassing. It was real.
Well, we wanted to talk to you on the podcast, to talk to somebody that was not wasn't there with John Wayne, but has a John Wayne-esque lifestyle. And so, I'm sitting there and we're like, do we do it at your house? Do we do it in the thing? Like, where do we do it? We don't have our office anymore. We don't really have a studio. And then our office, we have like our storage thing that we've kept, which is a little office in the front. There's like a gym next door, so you can't do it between like 9, 10, and 11. There's like weights pounding. So we're like, where the hell do we do this? So I'm like, she does a bunch of stuff. I do a bunch of stuff. Why don't we try to find something that neither one of us does regularly and just go do that activity and have a little conversation? And so that's how the horse thing. I'm like, let's go horseback riding, because Nathan had been like, come, you got to come horseback riding. You got to come do it. So.
To be fair, we got to meet Barry the mule. I mean, that was
the mules. I actually like the mules better than the horses.
I know. I kind of wish I would have been on a mule.
I got to tell you, spending a day with those horses, I don't feel like going back to see them anytime soon.
We got to go back. We're gonna have to read.
Is that a tattoo or a bruise from when you did our podcast?
I could not. It took me two months from. Well, let's just tell the story. Okay, so we did this thing. We went out on a horse. We hung out in the corral for a while, and I could not connect with the mare that they had put me on.
And I couldn't connect with my horse.
When they presented the mare that I rode that day, it felt very much that like, we think this is the best one for you. Like, we're going to put you on this mare and she'll be great. She's a real sweet mare, like no problem. And I have some experience on a horse, but definitely nothing. I mean, I just show up and ride, and then that's it. And I could not connect with her. I felt like she didn't want to listen, and I'm like, oh, I'm probably doing everything wrong with her.
No.
She just did not want to connect with me at all. Everything that I wanted her to do, she was not going to pay attention to. But we finally were like, well, let's get ourselves out of the corral and go actually on a trail. And as you said, it was windy, and maybe we should have paid attention to that, but we're down for the adventure, right? And so I know we took off.
I was paying attention to it, and I was watching like my horse's reaction and your horse's reaction. They were both like, they're kind of wide-eyed, and the dune buggies are going by, and shit's blowing through the desert. Papers are flying by. They were definitely like, wow.
And so all that's happening, and then we finally get to the point of where we're going to turn around, and horses once you turn around.
The turnaround is always rough.
And so I was ready for that, and she was getting a little bit more spirited, and I don't know what happened. Something set her off, and she felt me shift. She got me to shift in the saddle and knew I was off.
She got you out
balance.
of the saddle, and that was it. I could see it when we were together. I'm like, damn.
It was
I hope she rolls and doesn't just smack.
once I realized I was coming off of her, I just mentally was going, okay, like you've got to get off. I don't want her to force me off. I want to be able to get off.
And you hung on for a long time because she was giving you like you were almost back in, and she just kept like hopping to get you up, and she went all the way around. So you probably thought you were going to fall here, and it ended up over there.
All I could think of is I couldn't tell where my boot was in the stirrup anymore, and I was just panicking that if I ejected intentionally, was my foot going to eject? Because she did not feel like she was going to stop, and to that point, she didn't. When I got off of her,
she disappeared.
She took off,
Yeah.
and so it could have been a lot more exciting.
Well, just so you know, I was thinking about if that happened and you were caught in the stirrup, I would have been there.
You would have been there?
Yeah, I got between her and the corral.
Oh, you would have saved.
In case she started
that would
running
have
with you.
been. So all of this is on two cameras.
But I would have had to drop my GoPro to do that.
Okay, so we would have lost the GoPro, but we would have had the other footage. That would have been epic. You would have saved me on horseback. It would have been like a true Western.
Yeah. Well, let's go back.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again.
Well, so I guess to me, I had wrongfully assumed that like horses were just a very standard part of your life, and I know that's probably an error on my part, but I feel like it's kind. I mean, I could see people making that connection.
It was, sure. I mean, because as a kid, my life was 30% on a film location, which was horses and wranglers and stuntmen, and then probably 30% was on my dad's boat, which was Alaska or Mexico, and then 30% or less probably at home.
Okay. You broke up your childhood into these three parts.
Yeah.
So the horses and the Western part of your life
Movie making
was the movie version. Yeah. So there wasn't like a.
But his movie making was always, a lot of time. When I came along, he was using a little sort of Western town in Durango, Mexico.
Okay.
So we'd go down there and they'd film there, and we lived in that town, for 2 or 3 months at a time. And you go out to location and there's all the, the horses are there and whatever they need for the movie is there. So as a kid, you're just playing with all of it, stunt guys, wranglers, fun.
That sounds like a blast.
But not super formal. It was kind of like, sun comes up over there. We're over here. If you get lost, go up on that hill and look around. We have lights, and in those days they had like an arc light that you'd put this rod of material in, almost like a welding torch, and it would ignite that thing and burn.
Okay.
They'd get hot, and then they'd use reflectors, these big like Reynolds wrap sort of squares, and they'd reflect the light back. And so if you ever got lost, you could go up on a hill and see the reflectors and find your way back to the set.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you would be on set, like how long were those movies when you would be filming?
It'd be like a 3-month.
A 3-month
filming.
commitment.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just be on that.
In the days where you're there before the sun comes up and you're there after it goes down. So it's all work, right? And then at night, it's sort of having a drink, talking it over with your buddy, reading the script, going to bed. Okay. But I was a kid with the guy that was doing that. I got to do it with him once. I was in one movie called Big Jake. But the rest of the time, I had a tutor and I had to do my schoolwork and all that.
Okay. It's very interesting to everyone else because this is definitely not a life that.
And when I think back on it, it's really interesting. It was great childhood. My dad and mom were, slightly estranged. They ended up getting they never divorced. They separated and settled. But, they weren't spending a lot of time together. So it's me and my dad who was older, and, he might have somebody living with them that was another older actor like Bruce Cabot or one of these guys that he knew for a long time. So it was real. And you're in a house in Mexico. It was cool.
What was something that you enjoyed doing? I mean, other than just existing.
Bruce Cabot was an actor that was in a lot of movies, and in the morning, they'd have their coffee, and he'd go, "I'm getting in the shower. Go get your Uncle Bruce's." I don't know what he called it, something, but it was about that much vodka in a glass. And so I would go pour his vodka, hand it to him in the shower, and he'd drink his little vodka in the shower, and they'd go to work. Yeah, it was a good childhood. They were the guys were great. They were sort of manly men.
Mm.
They seemed to be pretty honest about everything. Like honesty was sort of the basis of their existence, which is kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
A lot of the nonsense you see today.
Yeah.
And then, the guys on that crew, everybody on a film crew is really a professional. Everybody shows up to get a job done, and they all work as a team to, move the ball downfield and get it into the end zone. So I like the fact, and I think I watched my father really like the fact of being project focused. Here's where we are, here's what we're doing, and he went in 100%. He knew the script backward and forward, and cared about everything that was being done. And, he didn't show up like when it was his time to show up. He was there. Like even here, I felt odd spending the first half of the day walking around this cute little town. I'm like, I want to be there. Like, I want to be there at the start. I don't know. It's just they had great attitudes, they had great work ethics. They were professionals. They didn't, there weren't a lot of paparazzis back then. It was really like, here's what we're doing. Here's this thing, and let's go do it.
How much of, and I just realized we just jumped right in, which I love, but your father is John Wayne.
Yeah, my father was John Wayne.
So referring to your father this whole time, but obviously there is a big personality associated with your dad.
Yeah.
And because of the way Hollywood was, obviously, like you just said, there wasn't a lot of paparazzi. So their personal lives were their personal lives. And we just kind of, as the public, got to absorb this on-screen person. How much of that was was that a character that he fell into, or was it actually just your dad?
Boy, I'm sitting here at 60 years old, and the last time I saw my dad, I was 17. So what you're going to hear from me is a sort of a child or really young man's sort of perspective. But I think John Wayne was a character that Duke Morrison created over a long period of time. My dad was born in Iowa. He came from very humble beginnings. They moved out west to Mojave, where they tried to farm and they failed.
Okay.
And then they ended up in Glendale, which was pretty rural back then.
Yeah.
I remember him describing Hollywood as like little ranchettes and dirt roads all the way to the beach. He's like, it's paradise. It's paradise.
It would have been.
So they end up at Glendale. The parents don't get along great. The dad wasn't very successful, but he was a very liked person, a very giving person. He just wasn't financially successful. And my dad focused on academics and athletics. He liked school. In high school, he was, on the newspaper, on the dance committee, in the drama club, on the debate team, captain of the football team. I mean, he was, pretty involved in all aspects of, what would you call it? Like the community of high school.
Okay.
Like taking advantage of it, participating, learning how to interact with people, learning how to have civil debate, learning how to compete, learning how to work on a team. And he wanted to go to the Naval Academy. Didn't get into the Naval Academy, but his high school football team won the CIF championships. And he got a scholarship to play at the University of California, at USC. So while he was on that football team, they did some extra work for the studios for football movies. And at some point down in Balboa, my dad hurt his shoulder body surfing.
Okay.
There's two stories. One that he broke his leg, one that he hurt his shoulder. I don't know which one's true. Seen them both and heard them both.
Okay.
But anyway, he got an injury, lost his football scholarship.
Got it.
So somebody got him a job on the back lot at Fox Studios. Movies are kind of a new business. They just started doing sound films, and he's a big, handsome, athletic guy. He's secure in himself because of all the things that he's done to become a young man. and he's well liked and he's a hard worker. So even though he's bottom of the rung, prop man's assistant, he makes sure every leaf that gets blown into the scene is swept up. And if there's geese that need to get herded, he herded the geese. If they needed to be a production assistant, he worked hard to be a production assistant. And I think it might have been a little freer in those days to move around to different jobs on a movie set. But what he became was sort of indispensable, and they liked him. And then one day, he was moving furniture for a director, a guy named Raoul Walsh. And Raoul Walsh wrote a book called Each Man in His Time. And his life is very interesting. Anyway, he hired my father, watching him carry these chairs that had taken other guys, 2 or 3 guys to move. My dad picked it up and went up the stairs and set it down. And he was looking at him and he's like, maybe I'll use this raw talent in my film as opposed to a well-seasoned actor. And so he ended up hiring my father for this film called The Big Trail, which was a big production, big deal, but was sort of a financial failure. Okay. So at 21, he's a star of a movie. The movie doesn't do good, and he does get to keep working as an actor. So he's left, gone from prop man's assistant to production assistant, stunt guy, bit player. There's a whole bunch of stories in there. But anyway, he ends up working as an actor through this 10-year period after The Big Trail, where he was a star in these Lone Pine, Alabama Hills, Vasquez Rocks, weekly westerns, where you just kind of got beat up and you didn't make a lot of money. And maybe it was like being on a soap or something, you're just grinding through it. But another thing I heard him say is, I learned how to deliver bad dialogue in a good way, something like that, And he said, so when he finally got to be in a film called Stagecoach, which was directed by John Ford, who was somebody that he was attached to and around the film business, but John Ford had never hired John Wayne yet. John Ford finally hired him on Stagecoach and made him a star in that movie, or he became a star in that film. And that's where John Wayne started to get formed. Because in the early days, you see him looking like every other actor. Oh, you don't say, you didn't, you dirty, like they had the big hat and the thing. Right. But he morphs, and he becomes this other personality. And he's described it as, I want John Wayne to be who you want your son to grow up to be, who you'd want to marry your daughter, who you'd want for your brother-in-law, who you'd want your father to be. Like an amalgamation of all the great great character set and value set that belonged to a lot of the people who forged their way west and really built America. They focused on truth and fairness and opportunity, but not opportunity with, what do you call it? With responsibility. So you don't get the job because you're something. You get the job because you're the best person to do that job, regardless of anything else.
He embodied kind of that Americana spirit.
Yeah, and I think we've slipped away from that a little bit in the last few decades. And you get there on merit.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it. Like, we want the best person for the job. Yeah. In this.
It's the only fair way to run things.
Right.
It's not fair to put somebody in a job if they're not the best at that job. Yeah.
Right. No, Well, I wanted to go back to, you had kind of touched on the relationship between your father and Ford, John Ford. Those two kind of formed quite a partnership beyond that first initial.
Yeah, I think John Ford was really a mentor to him and a very, very good friend. But as I understand it, I met John Ford, but I was just a little boy. And he creeped me out because he always had like a cigar and he'd have a handkerchief and he'd like have the, like chewing tobacco. And then he'd just put the corner of that handkerchief in his mouth. He did something weird with it. It was always like soaked with tobacco juice. I remember as a kid just being like, take that thing out. Like, stop. But yeah, they had decades together. And some of the, my father was a part of John Ford's best work and John Ford was a part of my father's best work. And so They had an on and off screen relationship, and a tough relationship. You know, John Ford was a taskmaster,
Yeah.
and he wanted the best from people. So he was not easy on them.
It sounded like he didn't really hold back from
No. And
your
you know,
dad
people
either.
would talk about like the brutal tongue lashings that John Ford would deliver to the actors. And the different like psychological tricks that he'd play with them, you know, like tell them the big scene's coming up, get ready, it's coming, we're going to shoot it this evening, and they'd sweat it out, you know, and then he'd go, cut, we'll do it tomorrow, and they'd be like, and they'd have to go home and think about it all night again, and come in and deliver it. And he, you know, he wasn't above, you know, talking to my father like, you call yourself an actor? You're not an actor. Go back and try it again. You know, I mean, I guess he was rough.
Yeah.
I guess he was rough.
But do you think that kind of formed the grit that the John Wayne character?
I think it's certainly something that gets rid of ego and, you know, makes the person go deep and think about what they're doing or what they're trying to accomplish or what they're trying to portray or what they're trying to imagine so that they can take you on the journey with them. Yeah. And maybe getting rid of ego is the main point of what he was doing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you watch the SEAL teams or any of those guys, you know, they kind of take care of your ego first.
Right.
You go to jiu-jitsu, you spend a year like saying goodbye to your ego, right? You're like, okay, I'm not all I thought I was.
And that's powerful.
Let's start.
Yeah, that's powerful, I think. I know you lost your father at 17, right? So I know that's not a lot of time to spend with somebody who was so public in their persona or who this image was. But like, what's a cherished memory that you had with your dad?
I think different than maybe a regular dad. My dad was 56 when I was born, so he's established in his career. And he had the option to take me or us kids with him, you know, when he was working or when he was on vacation. So I was lucky enough to go on set and have tutors. And, you know, I mean, education on set for me was 20 times more interesting than going to a private school.
For sure.
I mean, 3 hours a day with this big giant dude named Tom Hennessy. He was like 6'8", 3. He had a big beard. He always played a heavy in the movies. He was the school teacher.
Really?
And so he'd take me through town and we might go to, you know, the market or something that was happening in these little Mexican towns. And he'd explain to me why I was learning certain things and why I would learn math, how I could apply it to something in my life, like why I might want to know how to do this. And you see people talking about it today. They're like, what are we teaching these kids in school? Like, are they able to balance their checkbook? Are they able to understand why, you know, how certain things work? And I was lucky because I got that. And I got to be with my dad while he was working. He wasn't gone all day and then I only had him at night. I was with him. Not only was I with him, but we were somewhere else. And we were roommates in some weird place. You know, you never knew where you were staying. It might be a hotel, might be you know, you're talking about the late 60s in Durango, Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, for a kid, it's paradise. Like for me, it was paradise. They'd let me drive. I could ride horses. I could disappear. You know, it was great. So I think I had more time than I might have had with my father had he been an insurance salesman or something like that. And I had good quality time. Like you ask what I cherish, whether it was on the boat or on location, it was, you know, it's just getting a few minutes to go for a ride. Like you're gone for 15 or 20 minutes during a break and we're just, you know, riding down the trails together. You know, it's
just
fun.
Time.
Yeah. If you're taking a bunch of people on a trip and you're having to be on and you're doing all that and whoever your closest friends are or your husband or you know, you get a few minutes with them out in the middle of, you know, some canyon or something and you just get to talk for a minute.
Yeah.
And I think those are the times that I miss. And, you know, at 17, and I was you know, you couldn't have been a bigger knucklehead than I was as a teenager. And, you know, I just remember like coming home sometimes and my dad looking at me and going like, Jesus Christ. So go to bed, we'll talk tomorrow. You know, he's just like, he's like 56, you know, my wife's moved out. I got this thing living with me. I just can't imagine it. So we almost got to be like two men together, but we didn't quite make it. You know, we got close. I have, a lot of great memories, but from my childhood brain, and my childhood brain was compromised. I don't know what you call it. I feel like I'm just learning now, and I'm 60, so I'm just figuring things out. And I wonder if my father had been alive for another 10 years, if that would have been accelerated for me. I don't know.
Did you, during that time, was he just dad? Or did you have a concept of what John Wayne was to that?
As soon as I was born, he left the San Fernando Valley. He lived in Encino and moved to Newport. So Newport, people didn't even live there, in the winter. I think Newport started because some developer, like if you bought something in Pasadena, you got a free lot down on the peninsula, like thrown in with the deal.
So crazy.
So it was just a small little community. He was obviously, he was John Wayne. And maybe this is because I'm just not that bright, but we didn't live that kind of lifestyle. Like he had a big boat. It wasn't fancy. It was comfortable and it was functional, but it wasn't like a yacht that you might see in a magazine today with, fur-covered chairs, and you know what I mean. It was different. It was an adventure boat. Some people go on adventures where you pay someone to sort of shuttle you around, and other people go on adventures and figure it all out themselves.
Yeah.
They put their equipment together, they use it, and that's kind of how our life was. So as a little boy, I got a lot of experience around, boats and guns and diving and horses and stunts and movies and So it was different that way. I didn't pick up on it. I didn't pick up on the fact that he was a movie star, and it's still, he's been dead for 40 years. I took over a family business, a decade ago or something, and it just gets more and more mind-boggling, the influence and the impact that he had over his lifetime, all over the world to this day. And I know that he would be shocked that people are still interested in watching his films and sort of missing his message, his humor, that they still would be cherishing him. I know that would surprise him. Because he would be like, no, once a film's done, it goes to the theater, it plays for a month, and then it's over.
So
he didn't care about rights. He didn't care about any of that stuff. He's just on to the next one. He didn't really sue people if he was taken advantage of or, compromised some way. He just said, God damn it, I thought he was a good guy, and he'd move on. He had the opportunity to continue to move forward. I think he was surprised to be 68, 69, 70 years old and be able to go out and make a living as a leading man. I think he looked at every day as a gift, and every film opportunity that came, I think he was thrilled with it. Whether he showed it outside or not, I just think he was forever grateful. You know what I mean? Like he might not show it, but I think inside
never felt like he was owed.
He'd be going like, "Wow, I can still do this. This is amazing." I think he really appreciated it, and he really appreciated the people who liked him, his fans. Like, we never had a dinner or a lunch out somewhere where we weren't interrupted, and he was always very kind and giving of his time. So I think that's why the boat was pretty important to him, because it allowed him a place to have a little space to spend time with his people. Yeah.
I think it would have made sense if your personal career, as you grew older, fell into the Hollywood lane, even though Dad was normal at home and he didn't bring Hollywood home.
Well,
but did you ever dabble in the film industry?
I did. I was into motorcycles when I was a kid. I raced dirt bikes, and
let's talk about that too.
I showed horses for my dad. I did all that stuff. I liked trail riding and being around the horses on the movie sets more than I liked going to a place and learning how to switch leads or do some of the things that we did in those horse shows. I knew a bunch of the stuntmen and the wranglers as a little boy, and when my father died, I'd reached out to a stunt guy to see about going motorcycle riding, and he goes, "No, I'm not going to be at this thing, whatever it was. I'm in Chicago." And he goes, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 17." And he goes, "Would you want to come work for me?" And I was like, "Yes, I would like to come work for you." My father died in June, so I missed the last 2 months of my junior year. Okay. And I was a little rudderless. Wasn't super close to, like, my mom had moved out. She lived not far away, but I didn't spend a tremendous amount of time with her. And so when he offered me that opportunity, I jumped on it. And it was for the Blues Brothers. And I got to go do stunt work on the Blues Brothers when I was 17. So, all of a sudden, this kid who's kind of floundering in high school is, I joined the Screen Actors Guild, and I'm working on a big movie, doing what I'm told, and, kind of making a living all of a sudden. My dad always had me where, like, I worked at a car place. I was a lube and oil guy. I worked in the parts department. I worked making oil water separators for big ships, all as a young person, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I quit working at Chick Iverson, Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi, and I took the GED, and I kept doing stunt work. When I got back from Chicago, I worked on, like, Knight Rider, Legman, BJ and the Bear, a bunch, all those shows in the 80s. And then they started giving me guest star parts on them. Okay. And then I did a soap for a couple of years, a new soap called Bold and the Beautiful. And then I had another TV series where I was LAPD. It was a remake of Adam 12. It was called The New Adam 12. So we did a few years of that. We had 52 episodes. And I did, like, movies of the week and different stuff mixed in there. Like, what were those shows? Like Suddenly Susan. And, I can't even think back. I'd have to go back and look on different stuff. So I worked in it for a while. And then that soap that I was on, so I was on a soap for 2 years, and I played this cop for 2 years. Then the people who produced the soap sold it to Europe, and it was starting at episode 1. So they called me, and they're like, "Hey, we're starting this thing over in Europe. They're starting episode 1. You're on it. Will you go help introduce it?" So I'm like, I was getting a divorce, and I was like, "Yes, I will go immediately." So I go to Europe, and it's in Italy. And I go to the airport, and all of a sudden, like, slowly people are starting to look at me and, like, gather around. It was a huge thing in Europe, and still is. And so in Italy, the show was very popular.
So you can't walk down the street.
And it was funny. I got like 5 minutes of fame over there. But they do a lot of co-productions in Europe where it's Italian French, Italian Spanish, Italian German, Italian Venezuelan, Brazilian, whatever. They all do these co-productions. And then they just dub. Like, you're popular in Germany, I'm popular in Italy, we're in this movie together. And then they just dub it into whatever language,
Gotcha.
they're going to play it in. So I did a few of those over there, and that was really fun because, I'm living in Europe, working as an actor.
Absolutely.
So 3 to 6 months a year over there, and then back home for delivering airplanes or fixing up boats.
This is all new to me because whenever we've talked about this, you just focus on the motorcycles with me. And so I didn't even know you had this whole career.
Oh, yeah. I did a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
A bunch. But, it's like, I don't know where you'd even go to watch one of those. You know what they were doing? Like the Showtime things now, like Ozark and all these, like, sort of, multi-episode stories. They were doing that in Europe at that time. So, I'd go to work on something that might be a 5-month-long project with a bunch of episodes. And there were these, like, dramas that went on. And they were fun. And, I worked in India, Brazil, Venezuela. The hell's the other? I worked all over South America, the Philippines, and Germany, and England, and, just kind of everywhere. So it was a great experience. But at a certain point, I thought, man, you've got to go back and, like, it just didn't feel like I was really doing, like, if I was going to be an actor, I should be back in Los Angeles or New York or somewhere focused on it.
And was there a return to Hollywood?
I came back and I did some little sort of fixer-uppers with houses. I used to do, like, planes and boats, and then I did houses and rentals. And then my brother died, and I worked a little bit on John Wayne Enterprises with him. And I thought, well, okay, I know a little bit about this. We'll go in and we'll get it organized and we'll find someone to come in and run it. And it just sort of snowballed. It was very difficult to find somebody to run that company in a way that I felt would take care of my friend, like a guy that I liked. So we...
What was the purpose of John Wayne Enterprise? Like, what was the...
To preserve and protect the name, image, and likeness of John Wayne.
Okay.
You know, so it's really, there's no films in there, it's just really advertising and merchandising rights. So if somebody wants to make a commercial or a film or whatever, they have to come get those rights that weren't originally granted with whatever they were working on. But we also, you know, created some John Wayne product to protect trademarks in the marketplace and to keep other people from doing things. And so when I took over, a lot of people were doing all kinds of different product, and most of that was licensed product. It's kind of made overseas, and so it was a little bit of a learning experience, trying to figure out how best to represent him. If we have to do this to make enough money to cover a bunch of legal fees to protect him in the market, you also kind of have to have something else in the market. Like if they're selling it, there's a vacuum there. People want it. Right. So we got to fill that vacuum for them. So we just started creating our own product.
I guess that makes sense. That's probably a perspective that I could see someone being like, "Oh, you're just trying to make money off." But no, you kind of you're forced into these arenas because you do have to. That makes sense.
Yeah.
If they're producing a product that people want to buy, and illegally or unauthorized or whatever,
and maybe they're really focused on their collectible licensed merch, which is fine. Everybody's got it. But then I look at it and think, gosh, okay, if we're going to do a mug or something like that, then let's do a mug the way he would like it, or something that was a part of his life. So it forced us to sort of create our own line of products. And so that was, you know, a different journey. And then there was a bill that we kept getting for storage. And my brother died suddenly, and we didn't talk a lot about the business. Anyway, there was this bill for storage, and we could go up to this place, and you know, it's one of those Indiana Jones, you know, where it's just like those like 10 by 10 wooden vaults stacked on each other, like way up high. And we had like 40 of them in there. I'm like, we got to go see what's in there. When my father died, he had given all his art, guns, and memorabilia to the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. Now it's the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. So I think in our, you know, in our heads as a family, all the great stuff is already in a museum. But as I went through these storage vaults, you know, it's like toilet paper, dry cleaning fluid, Academy Award. I thought we were going to throw all this shit away, but we should probably go through everything now, because there's just a treasure trove of his life in these vaults. So basically, I lived with my father. My one sister was out, and my little sister spent, I think, more time with my mother. So when he was sick, you know, I put him in the back of the station wagon and drove him to UCLA, and he never came out. And before I could go home, the executors had locked that house down. And so everything that was in that house, I think we were all allowed in one day with like these stickers, you know, and I could pick like 10 items. I had to go put like 10 stickers on. For me, it was weird because this is my house. Like, this is where I live.
Right.
I'm like, you know, it was just a strange time. So once we did that, they just literally took every drawer out, put it in paper, folded it, put it in a box. So everything that was in my father's house, my house as a kid, was in this storage.
Okay.
So then, you know, we rent a warehouse and we put all this stuff out there, and we start going through it. And it was really, you know, it was significant and interesting. And there was, you know, an opportunity to do something with it. And it took a few years because I'd seen nothing but celebrity museums fail. And so they have all this great memorabilia, but they can't pay the rent. And then creditors come in, or, you know, they get loans against it, and they end up sort of losing it or having to auction it off or whatever. And we had our own legal issues around this time, and some items were auctioned off, but we've started buying those back now.
Okay.
Anyway, went on this long search to try to find a place that might be a good home for it. LA, Las Vegas, Nashville, Branson, like where do you put this stuff? And we went to a guy named Michael Gaughan, who owns the South Point Casino in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Is very involved in the National Finals Rodeo and offered us a space to do a small pop-up museum for John Wayne. So we went to the South Point and we did this pop-up, and it was very successful, and we sold merch, and people really liked what we had. And that same event, I know a guy named Patrick Gotch, who owns the Cowboy Channel and RFD TV. And we'd been trying to find something to do together. And he came over and he goes, I want to introduce this guy, Craig. He's taken over the Fort Worth Stockyards, and he's got a big redevelopment project going on down there. I'm moving my Cowboy Channel in there. We redid the old auction barn to make it our studio. I think this is a great place for you to come do a museum. So went down there with Craig and Patrick, and they showed us what was going to happen there. And it was really compelling, and, Texas is a great spot, and we just went down there and started building a museum.
Okay.
And gosh,
the rest is history.
That's kind of where we are today, but that is, I don't know. Sometimes I think about going back and working as an actor. Do you know who Ben Christensen is?
The name is familiar.
He's a content creator. He's on Instagram, and he loves Western films. And so his hashtag is living my own Western.
Okay.
And he's a nice young guy. He's a photographer and videographer, and has embraced like old Western fashions that I remember when I was a kid. And I got to know Ben, and he wanted to make a Western. And so to make it happen, a bunch of us just volunteered to go do it. So camera, props, costumes, lighting, actors, horses, wagons, guns, we all show up in Kanab, Utah.
Oh, okay.
And we, spent a month there making this little Western. And so that's when I really thought, gosh, you're not getting any younger. This was so much fun. Maybe go back and do some acting. So that's been on my radar the last, 6 months.
Okay.
In a big way. I'm not anxious about going to LA, but to do the work is really, it just took me back to my childhood, and part of my life was, I grew up on movie sets, and then I worked myself on sets for a while. So I miss the creativity and the freedom of sort of playing pretend and, being around horses and great people and all working and getting dirty.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
Oh, I think you think about it, but I think you should. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Okay, you talk for a while.
Well, no, I wanted to ask you, because you said the enterprise, which is obviously the protection, but kind of how our relationship started, which is now several years old. I actually have to tell our intro story as well, but the John Wayne Foundation, when did that come about? Was that
So that was established in 1985, and it really we, through licensing, would fund it, or we would create programs through the John Wayne Enterprise that people could participate in, and then those people would actually be funding the Cancer Foundation. Then we'd take money from the Cancer Foundation. We go to the John Wayne Cancer Institute, which started at UCLA after my father died, and then moved to St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. And we would, use it to buy them important equipment or pay for travel or, fund some kind of research that was going on there. And really significant research was done at the John Wayne Cancer Institute. I mean, monoclonal antibodies and cancer vaccines and, oh my gosh, like gene therapies and all the seeds of all these technologies that you're seeing now were started by a lot of the doctors and researchers that were at the John Wayne Cancer Institute. There's no longer a Cancer Institute. Now it's all in the Cancer Foundation, and we have partnerships with UCI in Southern California and Texas Tech in Texas. And then we fund research in other areas. But the enterprise has always driven dollars towards the foundation as well.
Okay, so that's the relationship. Well, I mean, your dad is, for the fans is larger than life to most people. So I am tickled that our relationship, while I respect and revere your father's position in our culture, I love that it has nothing to do with how you and I really kind of overlap.
Yes, it's this Instagram relationship.
Totally. Like, all of these are Instagram relationships. But you...
In fact, I'm like, oh, where's Stace was here? We call everybody by our Instagram name. Traveling with Finn, we're ready for you.
It's this weird new reality where we all overlap because of social media. But you had reached out, and I think because I was at the time was doing a lot of traveling through the Eastern Sierra, which if you don't know, Lone Pine is a part of that lineup. And I think maybe some of the images I was throwing up there were just, throwing.
I'm like, who's this?
I know these places. And if you don't know, Lone Pine contains the Alabama Hills, which is very famous for its film lineage, from, your dad's era to before, in even present day.
Star Wars, John Wayne, car commercials, everything.
Yeah, it's amazing what's been filmed out there. There's actually a museum out there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have got to have a relationship with the museum.
That's where we do our packet pickup.
Right,
That's our parking lot for the run.
There you go. And so the foundation does these runs all over different locations for films. Is that kind of the...
Well, we just do them in locations. Really do them in places I like to go. So, there's a connection obviously in the Alabama Hills to John Wayne. So that makes a lot of sense. And Lone Pine's really friendly to us. So it's great to be able to put on the run there. And the runs were really a way to let people know about the foundation. Because if you were in cancer, if you're a researcher, if you're reading papers that are published, then you know about John Wayne at Cancer. If you're going to get breast cancer treatment, you don't know that the sentinel node biopsy technique came from John Wayne. You just don't know these things. And so I thought, well, we've got two things. We can't keep this thing quiet because it's John Wayne, so it needs to be out there, and people need to understand the good work that's been done in his name. Because if you go to the museum, you'll see a wall of his film credits, this massive wall of all the movies he's done in every year. Well, at the end, we've got another wall, and it's all the doctors that he's trained since he's been dead. It's a legacy that he doesn't know about.
Wow.
So you have all these incredible surgeon researchers, fellowship-trained surgeons who are at the top of their game in brain, breast, melanoma, GI. They were all trained by John Wayne, and that's a legacy he has no idea existed. Each one of those doctors does surgeries, and they also do research, but they see 400 to 600 patients a year. So just on that wall, there's 100,000 people who are getting cutting-edge treatment that wasn't available to them before because of John Wayne. And I want people to know that. And so that's why we're like, what could we do with the foundation? Like, I like to be outside. If I'm going to go do it, let's do something outside. Let's do runs. Well, I don't want to just do like a 5K in the middle of the shopping center. Let's go to Lone Pine and see if people will show up. They're going out there and they're car camping and they're hiking and they're rock climbing. They're doing stuff anyway. Maybe they'll come hang out with us for a couple hours and do some good. So, Pioneer Town, Lone Pine, Newport, because he lived in Newport, and it's a great place. So we just try to pick locations that people who like to be outside will be happy about.
And that you're willing to go to.
Yeah. And I saw your post, and you're in the Eastern Sierras, and, you're kind of living a different lifestyle than the majority of people live. You're not really a prepper, but you're somebody who has a base of knowledge that would be great for everybody to have. Like, there's so many dads who wish that their daughters just had a base of knowledge like you. Well, I'm like the uncle from hell, because when my niece and nephew get in the car, I'm like, they're like, let's go. I'm like, you tell me how to get there. They're like, we don't know how to get there. I'm like, figure it out. Where's the sun? Okay, it rises in the east. These basic things that I got, you were showing in your Instagram. And when we were starting to make John Wayne product, my John Wayne product is kind of like late 60s and 70s styling. And you embody that as well. I'm like, well, see if this girl will talk to us and take some of our stuff.
Well, that was this was years ago, and it was in those early phases of social media where I didn't quite know what I was doing with this tool of social media. And I know we were following, and we kind of did similar adventures. But in my ignorance, I saw your name, but it did not ring any bells. Like, I mean, it just didn't register. It wasn't in the realm of possibilities that you could be what that name represented. So
the guy from The Bold and the Beautiful.
That's exactly what I was thinking. But
Storm Logan.
Oh my gosh, were you Storm Logan?
Yeah.
That is an amazing name, Storm Logan.
Storm. Listen to the names of the show: Brook, Storm, Thorn, Ridge. And I'm trying to think what some of the other ones were. We were doing like the first readings, and we were all like, "Who's Ridge? Are you? I'm Storm. You're Thorn. You're." It was weird. It was so much fun.
What a weird little
I'm so
culture.
grateful to those people for hiring me for that.
Oh, totally. What an experience that was. But I have to keep telling the story because it's just so good. But you reached out, and at some point, you guys were launching the Duke, the bourbon or the whiskey brand.
Yeah.
And I think you and I had interacted a little bit more just about like locations, camping, outdoors. And then you were like, hey, this guy from the internet reaches out and says, hey, my company has this whiskey. I want to get you a bottle. And to be completely honest, I was like,
I know. That's why I had Jade do it. I'm like, I'm not going to write to her. This is totally creepy.
Well, no, and you followed it up with, I'm going to have Jade reach out to you, just giving you a heads up. And you did that perfectly because there was a bit of a hesitation just because of the unknown of the internet at the time. And so then I interacted with Jade, and I feel like I never saw like the John Wayne Foundation on anything. It was just, this is our office, here's the location. So I knew I was going to an office that I was aware of the office building. And so I worked up the courage and drove myself down to Newport at your old office. And for me, this is like such a great memory because I walked in, there's, all the desks, all the young, the young kids out front. Jade comes up, meets me. I say what I'm here for. Oh yes, he's here. So I'm going back to meet you in your office. And I'll never forget this. You are like in one of your chairs in your like little seating room. So not at the desk. You've got a guitar over your lap and a glass of whiskey. It's middle of the day, glass of whiskey, just sitting there. And you were about like it was just this, I'm like, oh, this is who I'm meeting. Okay. And your glass
That was all
office.
staged.
You did it well. I come in, you greet me, we get to chatting, and I'm just kind of like, part of me is like, why? I don't know why I'm here. Like, this is great.
We wanted to get you product, so you put it in your pictures.
I know that, and you're selling this whole thing, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. But you're trying to relate to me as to why you're a fan of my adventures and what I was doing, and I will never forget this. You looked at me and you're like, yeah, I just have loved watching. I mean, everywhere you go reminds me of, places I go with my dad. And as you're talking, I am looking up at the wall, and it's a little boy, a black and white photo blown up of a little boy with the one and only John Wayne. And I remember coming back and like focusing on you and being like, I'm sitting across from his son. From John Wayne's. What am I doing here? Like,
was that before we put John Wayne Enterprises on the outside of the
there
building?
Yeah,
I don't think we
either
had anything
I didn't
up there.
see it, or it didn't. And then of course it all made sense, and it was like, how did you miss this? How?
Well, I don't think we don't put it out there. I probably thought that Jade told you that we make product, and I was kind of proud of the new product that we were making. Ourselves. I really liked it, and I just wanted. You were somebody that I thought would be cool to get product to.
And so, I appreciate I just love
I didn't know you didn't really realize anything. And I don't think about it. So
but it makes me I'm happy that is how it happened, because I wasn't drawn in from this, which would have happened as soon as I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I don't know why they want to talk to me, but I'm coming in. But it was purely off
when
just
you
adventure.
left, I turned to like everybody. I'm like, I don't know if she was like happy or creeped out. Like,
no,
I'm not sure what just happened.
I walked out of there. I walked out of our meeting, sat in your parking lot, and called my dad. And I was like, you are never going to believe who I just talked to. And I just gave him the whole rundown. It was it was.
I'd like to meet your dad someday because his pictures, like he's wearing the leathers and all the stuff that I grew up with as a kid.
Well, so you were riding in the during that time period, right? So the 70s.
Oh yeah.
Because those photos that of my dad are all from like the 70 era.
Yeah.
So
I think my first motorcycle race was probably like I was 8, so that would be 70.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
70.
Did you ever do like Elsinore in Southern
I
California?
never did the Elsinore Grand Prix.
Okay.
It had ended before I could do it, and then when they brought it back, I wasn't racing motorcycles anymore.
Okay. What was the period of time that you were racing?
So from 70 to 87, probably.
Okay.
Probably right in there. When I started doing that soap, I just ran out of time for other stuff. And what else changed is, Corona and everything along the 91 used to be farmland.
Mm-hmm.
So, I could get to Paris or Carlsbad or Saddleback, which was off Chapman. Like I would go ride Saddleback before high school started and then go to school.
Different time.
As the farmland sold and turned into houses, you couldn't get around quick anymore. It became more of a hassle. So, I was working on television and I couldn't really like go do all the things I had been doing. So I just cut it back. But I commuted on a motorcycle a bunch to that soap opera. I think about that now and I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't drive my motorcycle to LA for anything right now.
They can avoid the traffic a little bit. You can lane split.
No, lane split, no helmet, radio blaring, just flying.
The good old days, man.
Yeah.
The good old days.
405. Oh my God.
So my dad is born and raised in Long Beach, so has watched the change of like the LA basin and just our Southern California, how it's morphed. And I mean, like my dad has an old photo of him and his dad riding motorcycles down Studebaker when it was a dirt road with fields on either side of it. And I know that Studebaker means nothing to everyone else, but I grew up off Studebaker as a kid where it was just residential housing.
If you're ever driving up the coast from Newport, take the coast highway to Studebaker because in Newport, you're 4 miles from the 405. At Studebaker, it comes all the way over. You miss all this traffic, you get on, you keep going.
There you go. Hot tip right there.
Yeah.
No, but I always find that so fascinating because, I mean, I've only known Southern California to just be heavily populated, and it's only gotten worse since I've been there, or been around. But I love hearing stories about like being able to do Saddleback in the morning before school.
Or get to go and pass like in 50 minutes. Like just be up there riding around by the Summit Inn. We'd park there and go, when I was a kid. And the guys I were riding with, they were still on Triumphs and BSAs in the the off-road frames.
Yep.
And I would be on like whatever I could get my hands on.
What did you ride?
I rode mini enduro. Okay. So a little 60cc mini enduro, XR75.
Okay.
And then I had a TL 125, which was a trials bike. Uh-huh. And I rode that thing all the way down Baja and back. It has like 3 really close gears and then 2 long gears.
On a trials bike?
Yeah. I'd ride just anything to go anywhere.
Oh, wow.
And then I got a Husqvarna 125. Okay. I rode that all over the place. And then I always liked 4-strokes. Mm-hmm. Now everything's 4-stroke. Mm-hmm. But back in the day, there was like the XR500, and that was kind of it for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then Husky came out with a 510. And so I got on that 510 and I would ride like a 250 2-stroke. I'd race that, and then I'd race the big 4-stroke.
Mm. But you always preferred the 4-stroke?
Pretty much, yeah. Mm. I liked it.
I'm a little afraid of the 2-stroke. I'm so green in the whole thing and not understanding it when the 2-strokes are like,
and I raced a lot, but I wasn't really good.
But
I grew up with guys who were like really good. And,
You just did it. You just did the thing.
Yeah, but I liked it.
Yeah.
And
that's
I
all that matters.
Yeah, I tried hard.
That's all that matters. You did it. You were a part of an era. I think that's like a real nostalgic golden age of motorcycle riding, and I feel that because of my dad, but also just because you were a part of that as well.
My dad wasn't into it, so he didn't like it. He wanted me to ride horses, but a kid in my neighborhood, his dad would take him. He lived with his mom. His parents were split up, but the dad would come take us to Baja or Pioneer Town
Yeah.
or to these places when we were little, or to the races. And yeah, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have gotten as much riding in.
Oh, I
And then my
love
dad relented and he'd start like, let me tag along with a motorcycle.
Oh, he let you actually
Yeah.
go. Oh, so were you on set like with him with a motorcycle?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
There was a stuntman named Everett Creech, and he had a Honda SL 350, which is a really cool looking old scrambler motorcycle that he put a camera mount on. And the movie that I was in, Big Jake, they doctored up one of the kids. That's like, I get kidnapped, and then my one brother's on a horse, and my other brother is into all the new stuff, and so he's got like one of those old time motorcycles with the handlebars that come back.
Yeah.
But it was a Montesa 360 that they doctored up to look like that. And so Everett had that doctored up motorcycle and then the camera bike. And I thought that was just the coolest thing ever.
But he missed your calling. You could have been a stunt rider.
Should have been a motorcycle salesman.
Yeah. Oh, or that. Or that.
I did some motorcycle stunts.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, now I want to know what that was.
Well,
Where can I see these stunts?
like BJ and the Bear. I can remember. I'm having to like clear the cobwebs out of my brain now. Stuff like, the semi's going and then I'd jump out the back.
What?
Or do cable offs where you tie cable to the motorcycle and then two bikes will like run at each other and you'll have a mark. And so when you get to that mark, you jump up and your bike hits the cable and flips. And then you're supposed to kind of try to smash the other guy in the air as you're going.
Oh, this sounds safe.
I never could get the guy. I always missed the guy. But we crashed. It was good crashes, wheelies, things like that.
Were there ever any major injuries because of this?
No.
Oh, wow.
No, like, elbows and stuff. But I never did, like I never jumped the whole bridge or anything. Like, just did stuff,
Just that.
getting chased by a car or whatever, skidding to a stop,
Okay.
whatever. In Knight Rider, I played a motorcycle racer. But they killed me right in the beginning of that one.
Oh,
I
man.
only got a little screen time.
Never good.
In 1976, I got a 1974 Elsinore 250. And that motorcycle changed my life. Like, it was the first time where I was like, oh, this thing works. Like, all the stuff that I'd ridden before that was kind of funky.
Okay.
But when I got on that motorcycle, I remember it was kind of big for me, but like we bonded. And that was a great bike. The guy who owned the motorcycle store in my house, he's like, somebody's got to take pity on this kid and take him to the desert. So they took me to the desert. And I think they were kind of all surprised that the kid could ride.
Oh.
Yeah.
So the Honda was your baby.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was it.
I think you missed your calling as a stuntman in Hollywood. That would have been.
No, those guys are so good. I can't do what they do.
You'd
I could do like the
you'd
basics.
You'd be broken into bits at this
The
point.
stunts got me to a place where I could get in front of the camera, and I'm forever grateful.
There you go.
But I'm not what they are. Well, I'm down for any adventure with you, Jillian. And I
Okay.
know you're out doing a bunch of stuff, and thanks for bringing me out here.
Oh, this is
It's
a blast.
fun to come here.
Thank
What
you.
I mean, in Storyteller, we haven't really talked about Storyteller. There's another weird connection. I bought a van because my sister and I have the same birthday, and we buy each other shit every year that you end up throwing away or giving away. And I'm like, look, we're not buying each other gifts anymore. We're going to do things. I go, I bought a van and I'm taking you and your husband and your kids on a road trip up to Seattle, around the Olympic Peninsula. And oh my God, screaming like misery. How long till we get there? No phones. Don't drink while I'm driving. Like so many complaints. And now we all talk about it as like the greatest time we ever had. And that's when I got my van. And it was a van with seats in it. And then once that trip was over, I had this young lab puppy. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so sick of having to travel everywhere and not be with my dog and do all these things. So I put a bed in the back and an outside shower. And, I just pieced it up to a point where it was really worked well for me and the dog. And I traveled in that van. And then at some point I came across this thing called a Storyteller where it was already done. And not only that, it had this battery pack in it that would run your air conditioner all night. And, you could have a microwave and it was just like uptown. And you couldn't get the things. It was like, oh, I'd like one. They're like, well, next year or the year after, maybe we'll have one for you. Long waiting list. So I go on the waiting list and sort of forgot about it. And then one day they called me like, hey, your van's going to be delivered on Wednesday. So I had to sell my beloved white van. And then I got my Storyteller. And it doesn't rattle and it's quiet. And it has like that cruise control that slows down by itself. Like all the stuff that I didn't have in my other one. And immediately I got that van and went straight to do that thing in Utah for the movie with Ben. And so I stayed in the van the whole time and man, just love it.
They're nice.
I almost drove it here, but there's the other connection is I bought this Storyteller thing and then all of a sudden Storyteller, separate from their vans, has made this network, right? And they heard Jillian.
Yeah. It's a small
and
world.
I'm like, I could have got a discount.
Mr. Chance.
Anyway.
Well, Eden, thank you so much for coming
thanks
out
for
here.
having me.
I really appreciate
I look
this.
forward to
This
our
is
next
fun.
adventure.
We're doing
and
it.
I'm so proud of you for all the stuff you're doing.
Thank you.
It's fun to watch.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. We're doing a good job.
Yeah. Did you ever taste the whiskey?
I did.
Okay.
Oh, how many bottles have you given me over the years? Of course I've tasted it.
We're not going to run out.
Okay.
All right.
That's a wrap.
See you. Thanks.